A lot of people have been asking me for direct to indirect speech. It's something that we don't even think about if we are fluent speakers. But exercises in direct to indirect speech is something that occurs in every examination. And therefore, this is in response to this big demand for direct to indirect speech. It's also called reported speech. It's also called narrative speech, but it's all the same. So everything you wanted to know, direct to indirect speech, learn with the Mind Springs English teacher. This is Usha Pandit, your Mind Springs English teacher. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe, you press the bell notification and give me your comments at the end so that I can help you with more videos of your choice. So let's begin right away. Direct to indirect speech is what you report when two people are talking to one another. So let's say Smita is talking to Latha. I will be eating lunch at 1. The cook is planning to make mango custard, Smita said. They're the actual words that she said. And Latha said, I love mangoes. It's my favorite fruit. What did you have for breakfast today? I ate eggs and drank milk, said Smita. Latha exclaimed, what a coincidence. I had the same breakfast of eggs and milk. So it's a small conversation between two girls. And this is direct speech. This is where they are talking to one another using actual words that they would use if they were speaking now. So how would you report this conversation? That is your indirect speech. Smita told Latha that she would be eating lunch at 1 and that the cook was planning to make mango custard. So if you were going to overhear this conversation and let's say tell your mom about the conversation that these two girls had, you would say Smita told Latha that she would be eating lunch at 1 and that the cook was planning to make mango custard. Now you will notice that the verbs will be eating has become would be eating, is planning has become was planning. Those are the big changes that you notice immediately, right? There are other changes. I has become she, and there is a that has been added, etc. We'll talk about it a lot more. Latha said she loved mangoes and that it was her favorite fruit. So she loved mangoes and it was her favorite fruit. So this is again, your tenses are not the same. Is and love has become loved and was in this sentence. Now, a lot of speakers, native speakers, when they actually speak, they say, Latha said she loves mangoes and it is her favorite fruit. And it's perfectly okay. All right. Because she's talking about something that she continues to like. But when you are asked to change to indirect speech, there is an expectation that you change that tense. So we are going to do it the examination way. Sunita asked Latha what she had for breakfast that day. See again, what did you have has become what she had. You might even say what she had for breakfast, which is a bit strange to say. What she had for breakfast is better. Smita informed her that she had eaten eggs and had drunk milk. So you've got had eaten, had drink. It's for drank has become had eaten, had drunk. Latha exclaimed it was a coincidence as she, Latha, had had the same breakfast of eggs and milk. Why are we saying Latha, she, Latha? Because there are two girls. And when we use this pronoun she, we are not sure whether we're referring to Latha or we are referring to Smita. And therefore, it is better to be on the safe side and mention clearly who we mean when we say she. So this is the way you would report this conversation to somebody else. So it's important to note the punctuation. So your punctuation of open and closed speech marks there have gone. You've got a comma just before your close speech marks. You've got a comma. All that has gone in this indirect speech. So punctuation is removed. Punctuation from the direct voice is removed in the indirect voice. Note also the change in reporting verbs that I've already made you note. Look at your red, and that's where your verbs have all changed. They have, what has happened is they have backshifted. Backshifted means literally going back in time. So the past becomes past perfect. The present becomes past. So it shifts back one stage in time. When you have the past perfect, of course, you can't go any further back, and therefore it remains the same. Okay, so that's your basic logic for backshifting of verbs, just going one step backwards in time. And that I have reported here in red. This is a PPT that you can look at again and again and slowly make sense of what I'm saying. Now you have in purple, you've got the noun clause, which is that. So when you report, what happens is you say something, and when you ask what, the clause that you get is a noun clause. Whenever you ask the verb, she said what, and after that, whatever you get is either a noun or a noun phrase or a noun clause. If it's got a verb, then you say that, and the cook was planning, etc. And therefore, it has a verb. Therefore, it's a noun clause. So you've got a that comes in. Here again, you have a that. So you'll have that or what, sometimes what, said what she had for breakfast that day. So therefore, those are your clauses, noun clauses. Just see the number of small changes that are being made. Note the back shift of the verb in red, which we've already talked about. The tense goes from present simple to or continuous simple to past and past continuous. So the simple tenses, I've done a table of tenses later, so we won't dwell on this too much. Modals also change from can to could, will, would, shall, should, may, might. These are your big modal changes that happen. Must becomes had to or have to or has to, depending upon your subject-verb agreement. In all of this, you cannot give up your subject-verb agreement. So depending on whether you're saying I or whether you're saying she or whether you're saying they as your subjects, your verb will have the right form. So that's why I'm saying must changes to has to or have to or had to, depending upon what your subject is. Change of pronouns. The other thing that changes is your pronouns change. I become she or he. You goes to she. My goes to her, which is a possessive adjective. My goes to her. And time clauses or time words or time phrases change. So today becomes that day, which I have put in brown. So you've got a large number of small changes that happen when you change from direct to indirect. The best way to do this is to actually speak it, is to actually report it, listen to other people reporting, and check on how they're saying it. It's very hard to follow every rule and do a sentence for a grammar examination. But it helps if you are in a hurry, you really don't know much and you are worried, then this is the way to go. So what is direct speech? We talk to people all the time, don't we? We use direct speech when we talk. Those are the actual words we speak. When we speak, we convey meaning, emotion, tone of voice, pitch of speaking, facial expressions, gestures. There's so much that we do. Now, because you're looking at me, you understand the meaning better than if you didn't see anything. If I was just a voice, it would be harder to understand than now when you can see my expressions. So anger, worry, happiness, all of these in the pitch of our voice, we whisper and we yell and we, sound angry. Many ways in which we express emotion. When we write, we have to say it. We have to actually express that anger. That's a difference. Direct speech is made up of the actual words of the speaker, which appears in writing as speech marks. So how do we know direct and indirect speech? We have to use speech marks so that when you see the speech marks, you know these are the actual words of the speaker. And normally they are said to another person. So if you're saying something to yourself, you normally don't put any speech marks. You're talking to somebody else, then your words are put in speech marks. Example, Sabha said to Prabha, I will come over to your house tomorrow. There's the speech marks. Notice the comma, said to Prabha, comma, and then before opening, there is a comma there. So that's something to notice. These are small conventions which people take pretty seriously when you don't put them in your writing. I cannot find a single dress to wear for the party. Again, comma, and then close inverted commas. The model complained. Why should we take so much trouble to study when there are no jobs? Ranted Meera. Now, why should we take so much? Look at my tone of voice. So even if I don't say ranted Meera, had I to say, why should we take so much trouble? From my expression, from my pitch, from my tone, you can tell that I sound annoyed. But if I'm reading this in a book, I need that word ranted because it adds meaning. It means Meera is angry and she's going on about it, about how unhappy she is, about the situation. So we use these words like ranted, which are reporting verbs. Will you find my blue socks? Raja asked his mother. Wait, ordered the teacher. So you'll find exclamation marks, you find question marks within the inverted commas. Now, when you have a question mark or an exclamation mark, you don't put a comma after that. So these are some of the conventions you need to remember. We use direct speech when we use dialogues in stories. And we sometimes use verbs to express feelings like uttered, muttered, things like that, muttered under his breath, etc., moaned. So my mother was everything to me, grieved Jane. Now, when we use this word grieved, it gives us the emotion of Jane feeling unhappy that her mother has passed away. That's the expression. Tells us very clearly that she's not just saying it, but she's grieving, which means the mom is no longer there. So this is your direct speech, okay? So don't forget the speech marks in direct speech. What is indirect speech? Indirect speech is also called reported speech or narrative speech. It is used for narrating later to someone what was originally said to him or her. So if you say something to me, I might talk about that conversation to a third person, or somebody completely new, a third person, might listen to two of us talking and report it to a fourth person. That is also possible. Think of how gossip travels from one person to the rest. So one person tells someone something, and then that person repeats it to somebody else, and then it gets repeated and repeated and repeated. And each time you'll say, she said, Ratna said, Mohan said, Hamida said, Prabhu said, Simon said. So you keep on taking various names. You might not even have the names of the original people who said it, but you keep on repeating what the last person said to you. Indirect speech, right? Indirect speech is used when a writer reports what the characters said to one another. Direct speech is good when you write because it adds drama. It tells you the actual words of the speaker. It puts emotions into what you're saying. And in stories, especially, this adds immediacy and authenticity to the emotions. So it makes the story interesting. Instead of just reading a story, what was said in direct speech, you put direct speech and it adds a little bit of drama to the story. Indirect speech, on the other hand, will move the story very quickly. So if two people are greeting one another, you might just say they greeted one another, or they met one another and shook hands warmly. You might just say that. You are not going to do the whole direct speech. Oh, hello, how are you? It's such a long time since I saw you. Where have you been? I've missed you so much. Now, all this is also a form of greeting and meeting and warmly inquiring after the other person. But you don't waste so much time. You just move the story very quickly along. So there is a place for direct speech and a place for indirect speech in a story. I've given you a long list of reporting verbs that convey emotion in direct speech. So you might want to keep it and use it in your writing because it makes it really interesting. So if you say questioned or quizzed or proposed or commanded, commented, advised, apologized, admitted, good words to use instead of saying said, or told or asked, which are the common ones we use. But these verbs really add a lot of color and power to writing. The rules and exceptions of indirect speech make it a bit complicated. The best way to acquire these is to, and quickly, is to listen, speak, and practice. So the more you report what people are saying, the more you kind of two people talk and then third person reports. If you're in a classroom, you can do this every day in the morning. Make two children talk and then third person reports, and you will get this naturally and quickly. Okay. Let's look at main tense backshift and let's look at exceptions. So as I told you, the present simple, so I put it under present tenses, past tenses, and future tenses to keep it simple. Otherwise, you can get quite embroiled in it and you can get quite confused. So present tense is present simple to past simple. So if it's a simple present like is, it will become was, right? That's what I mean. Or write will become wrote. Very easy, very simple, very quick. Present continuous, past continuous. Is talking will become was talking or were talking, depending upon the subject. Single subject was, plural subject were. Present perfect will become past perfect. So if I have a present perfect verb like has sent, then it becomes had sent. Present perfect has plus past participle. Past perfect is, present perfect is has plus past participle. Past perfect is had plus past participle. So has sent, had sent. Has written, had written. Has taken, had taken. This is what it is. Very quick transitions. Present perfect continuous to past perfect continuous. Present perfect continuous has been taken will become had been taken. So it's very simple again. If you don't know how to read your tenses, I've made a video on how to read tenses. Go and take a look at it. The past tenses will also change to the perfect. So I told you the backshift is one backshift. All the present tenses will change into the past tense, and the past tenses will change into the perfect tense. So past simple will become the past perfect. He said the girl asked for a copy. He said the girl had asked, past perfect. Similarly, past continuous will become past perfect continuous. Was having a bath will become had been having a bath. So one backshift. But your past perfect, when you get a past perfect, you cannot change it because there's nothing to shift it backwards. There's no other one more tense back, it simply does not exist. So we don't change it. So that's an exception. So whenever you see this had taken, had come, had gone, had something, past participle, you cannot change it back to anything because there's nothing there behind. Just think of it as nothing exists there. No other time exists besides the past perfect. Similarly, the past perfect continuous had been taking, you cannot shift it backwards because there is nothing there to shift it backwards. So past perfect and past perfect continuous, these perfect tenses in the past, perfect, simple and continuous, do not change. Actually, you can just look at these two exceptions in as far as tenses is concerned, because everything else seems to be changing. All are in green except these two are in red. The future tenses, you will change from simple future, will become would, and continuous will be going, will be coming, will become would be going, would be coming. So this will just changes to would. Future perfect will have gone, will become would have gone, or would have finished, or would have taken, whatever. This will becomes would. That's all to remember. And future perfect continuous will have been going, will become would have been going. So very simple. It is not very hard. If you just remember those two exceptions, everything else seems to change. Future tenses will to would. Just remember this and you're finished. You're done. Okay. So those were my main tense back shifts. Then let's look at modal auxiliaries. Now the modals are also verbs. We have main verbs and we have modal verbs. So the modal auxiliaries and verbs, sometimes they come as main verbs, the modals, and sometimes they come as auxiliaries. These also will backshift. And there are exceptions to this. So let's see what the modal verbs are. Your basic modal verbs, like you all know, is can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, must, ought. We have done a video on modals. Take a look if you don't know your modals. Now the changes in backshift is can becomes could, will becomes would, shall becomes should, will becomes. So that's a very easy one. May becomes might. And must, as I told you, can be has, have, or had to. Ought to becomes would have. So these are your basic shifts in your modal verbs. So for example, if I say, I can come to your house tomorrow, said Harsha, it becomes, Harsha said that she could come. Can becomes could. Harsha said, I shall come. Harsha said that she should come, or she should, some people say she should go. But I somehow am not comfortable with that, but just check with your boards what they want you to write. And then it goes on like that. Ought to come will become would have. So if you read these sentences, if you write them once in your books, in order, you will be able to see how the changes are made in the modals from direct to indirect. Note besides the changes in the reporting verb, these are just the verbs we are talking about. Remember the changes in punctuation, pronoun, possessive adjectives, adverbs. These will also change. So the exceptions to the rule are no change in reporting verbs from direct speech to indirect speech when you have the could, should, would. Can becomes could, shall, will becomes would, shall becomes should, etc. But the should and would and could, as I told you, there's nothing to shift it back. So they cannot be shifted. Examples in which there is no change in the verb as backshift. So I've given you some examples. I could not go to the concert, said Maya. Indirect would be Maya said she could not go. That could cannot be backshifted to anything else. I should go to see grandma, said Maya. Maya said that she should go to see grandma. No backshift. I would go to see her, I said. I said I would go to see her. Same. I might not take the car today, said Mohsin. Mohsin said he might not take. No backshift. I would have to swim to reach the shore. The driver said that he would have to swim to reach the shore. So there you go. No backshifts in the other verbs, modal verbs that actually change in the first one. So let's now quickly summarize the rules. The summary of the 7 changes to be made are: the conventions of changing to indirect speech involve: number 1, removal of speech marks; number 2, reporting verbs change; number 3, also you're said or told for statements and asked for questions. Said is followed by that and a noun clause. Asked is followed by if or whether and is followed by a statement without the inversion of the normal syntax. So you don't change the syntax to are you have you are. You keep it as a normal syntax, normal statement. So these are some of the changes that happen with the reporting verb. Then you backshift the verb tense. We've already spoken about that. Backshift of some modals, exceptions we have already talked about. Change in pronouns from I, he, she, you, we, to he, she, they. So these changes happen. Changes of possessive adjectives, my, our, to his, her, and their. So these are your pronoun changes that happen. Change in adverbs of time and place are changed. This to that, last to previous, tomorrow to the day after, yesterday to the day before, ago to earlier or before, last week to next week, following week or the following week, here to there and now to then. So you've got time and place changes that also happen. Example, direct speech is Ratna said, Mala, I will come to your house tomorrow. Indirect, Ratna told Mala that she would go to her house the next day. So see, those time phrases will, tomorrow becomes the next day. So these are your 7 rules for changing direct to indirect. No change in verbs if the original meaning. This is one of the most important slides that you should remember. This is the complication. Till now, there were no complications. It was straightforward. But when you come to this bit, the exceptions, there are certain times when you don't change the verb at all. You don't backshift it. And you say, and which is not the same as what I told you earlier for the past and past perfect kind of thing. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with the meaning of the sentence. And we are going to look at some of those. So pay attention. So thumb rule for change or backshift is there should be no change in the original meaning. So if I'm saying something to you, my original meaning should not change and become something else. Then it will become false. Suppose if I'm saying something and it has a particular intention or meaning, and when you report it, it's something else. It's the opposite, or it's no longer true. Then you have not reported me sincerely, have you? You have said something else, so it will be wrong. So you are, in that case, you must not change the verbs. So let us see an example. Suppose Maya said, I have a new car now. And you go and change it to Maya said, you need to change it to Maya said she has a new car. Why are we saying has a new car now? Because she still has a new car. Suppose if we say Maya had a new car, what will happen? It means that she sold it. What has she said? She said, I have a new car. That means right now in her house, there is a new car standing there in her garage. And if I go and report Maya had, it means she no longer has it now. The meaning has changed. And then it will become false. In that case, I will not change the verb to the past. So it will remain the same. So no change in the reporting verbs when they are in the present or the future tense. So when they're in the present tense or the future tense, just be careful, especially when you have these verbs like he says instead of he said. Be very careful. Look at what is being said. He says, I'm studying in Paris. You can say, he said. that he is studying in Paris. Because he's still studying. If you say he was studying in Paris, means he was studying last year, he's no longer studying, which would be false. Mr. Miyagi says drinking water in Japan will be safe to drink. So he says drinking water in Japan will be safe. You don't have to worry. Now, if you change that to he said that drinking water would be safe, it will become again a possibility. That means we are not sure would be safe. Maybe would be will become a sort of a strange, not very sure, which is not what he is saying, and therefore don't change it. People will always say we are patriotic. People will always say they are patriotic. Now, if they are patriotic, you are still patriotic. You can't say were patriotic. Were patriotic means now you become a traitor. So, guys, see, that is the change of meaning that you have to be very careful with. Okay. Other exceptions where there are no backshifts are historic facts. So if you say India got independence, you can't say India had independence. You can't say Mahatma Gandhi was the father of the nation. Is he not now? He is still now. So therefore, historic facts. Current news. If the newsreader says the earthquake has killed thousands today, which means it's just happened. Current news. I can't say the earthquake had killed thousands today. Had killed thousands yesterday, but today has killed. No change in backshift. Current news. Habitual fact. I brush my teeth every day is habit. I cannot change that and say I brushed my teeth every day. It will be wrong. Grammatically wrong and also just wrong, right? So therefore, habitual fact. Current truths. She said, my dad's name is Ramesh. Dad's name is always Ramesh. It can't be was Ramesh, means now he's called Sudhir. So therefore, it will go wrong. General beliefs. Poverty is a curse. God is omnipresent. All these are forever present tense. Do not change them into the past. Mathematical facts. 6 times is 72 or 6 times are 72. Whatever you say, present. Universal facts, the moon orbits the earth. We don't say the moon orbited the earth. Cannot say because now it's not orbiting. So you will go wrong. So universal facts, we must breathe. You can't say we had to, things like that. Present status, we are married. You can't say we were married. Were married means now we are divorced, which will be wrong. We are Indians, we will always be Indians, and therefore are will not change to were. So these are some of the facts that you need to be careful about. Now, in order to trick you, a lot of papers will give you one of these for your examinations and see whether they can trap you into backshifting it to the past tense. If you get into their trap, then you will lose marks. So be very careful with this slide. Okay. Let's come to questions. You've got WH and how questions. How do we change it into the indirect? So the rule is to keep the main clause the same. The main clause is always he said or she said or he asked Susan. Something like that is your main clause. So that clause will not change. So where do you live? Manisha asked Susan. Manisha asked Susan. Start with your main clause, indirect. So Manisha asked Susan will remain exactly the same. Start with that clause. And then where do you live? You drop the do, and where she, you becomes she. Where she, because you're talking about Susan, where she lived. Backshift, live to lived. But you change it back. You do not invert. Many people say Manisha asked Susan where did she live. Have you seen this? People make this mistake. Their indirect voice is wrong. Manisha asked Susan where she lived. Not where did she live. It's wrong. So please be careful. Go through this very carefully. Do lots of sentences for practice, but don't get this wrong. Even in spoken English, if you make this mistake, it sounds very bad. The maid asked Mrs. Singh How do you use this microwave? See, the questions are all starting with where, how, when, etc. The WH questions. And how. These are your question words. How do you use this microwave? Indirect, the maid asked Mrs. Singh how she, then the how word. See, the maid asked Mrs. Singh is your main clause. How is your question word, immediately question word. And then you make it a statement, how she used that microwave. There is a back shift in that sense. Do you use has become how she used. So I'm not saying we don't back shift the verb, but we make it into a statement in indirect speech. Just needs a bit of practice. Harvinder asked her mother, when will the guests arrive? So what will you do? Harvinder asked her mother remains the same. And then take the question word when and put it there. When the guests will arrive. When the guests would arrive. Will arrive will become would arrive. Mr. Bhattacharya asked his friend, why did you resign? Why? So Mr. Bhattacharya asked his friend, same, why he had resigned. Backshift the verb from did resign to had resigned, past perfect, and then why he had resigned. Not why had he resigned. People say that wrong. Tara asked Aisha, who is the chief guest they have called? Tara asked Aisha who the chief guest was, whom they had called. It was a bit tricky. Or who was called. You can do that also. Who the chief guest was, who was called. Paru asked Maitreyi, what are you planning to cook today? Paru asked Maitreyi, what? See, immediately put the question word, what? And then you become she. She was planning, are planning becomes was planning, past continuous, to cook that day. This becomes that. Today becomes that day. It's simple. Do a lot of speaking practice with this. Write down the correct sentences, change the inversions, backshift the verbs, and then say it to yourself many times loudly, and this will come out naturally when you speak. Okay? Then we have basic primary verbs in which the answer is yes or no. The rule is you take the to do and drop the do and revert the inversion. Like I told you, don't make it into a statement. Backshift the tense exactly as we did earlier with the WH. You do the same thing. So did he come? Asked Mr. Butt. Why am I saying yes, no questions? Because if somebody says, did he come? What's your answer? Either yes or no, isn't it? So they are yes, no questions. So did he come? Asked Mr. Butt. Mr. Butt asked. I told you the first clause will be your main clause. Mr. Butt asked. To be asked me or asked his peon or asked his wife or whatever. Mr. Butt asked whether. So now for a question like that, we use this word whether. When you have asked, you use if or whether. Asked whether he had come. See, he had come. Not asked whether did he come is wrong. Asked whether he had come. Why had come? Did come has become had come. Past perfect. Did come is a past tense verb. Please remember, did is always a verb in the past tense. Do is the present tense. Do and does is present tense. And did is past tense. You must not forget this. In questions, the helping verb did plus base verb changes to had plus base verb. Does he want a visa? Now, why is it does he? Does he because he is singular. He does. Suppose it had been they. We would have said, do they want a visa? It will become do because they do. Subject verb agreement. So, does he want a visa? Asked Mr. Butt. The indirect is Mr. Butt asked whether he wanted a visa. Mr. Butt asked, main clause, whether he wanted a visa. Statement. Mr. Butt asked whether he wanted a visa. That's it. That's the indirect speech. Just practice this, guys. It is not hard. Because then you won't speak wrong. It's not just the exam, it's also the spoken English where many people make this mistake. Exception for negative questions. So when you have a negative question, like all this was, did he come? Does he want a visa? All are positive, doesn't have a not. Now, when you have a not in the question, like doesn't he know the answer? When you have a doesn't he not, does he not? That's what we are asking. Retain the to do. So don't throw away the do, but keep it back in its back shifted form. So doesn't he know the answer? She asked. She asked if. She asked whether or asked if. She asked if he didn't know the answer. Does know becomes didn't know. Didn't, I told you, did is past tense. Do and does is present tense. So present tense becomes past tense. Whether he didn't know the answer. In the not, don't throw out the did. Had it not had a not, suppose the question was, does he know the answer? Your sentence will be, she asked if he knew the answer. You will not use the word did at all. But because there is a not there, you have to retain the did. Exception to the rule, remember. Didn't he say when he'll come? She asked. She asked whether he hadn't said when he would come. Now, when you have a does, which is a present tense, you will say didn't. And when you have a past tense, you will have to use the past perfect and it will become he, whether he hadn't said. Hadn't said is past perfect. Past tense will become past perfect. Present tense will become past tense. The backshift rules don't change in the questions. But when you have a do, does, you have the small complication. I want you to look at it. I want you to write several and practice with several do and does, didn't kind of questions. And you will be first class. Rule to be. What are your primary verbs? Your primary verbs are to do, to have, and to be. Now let's look at to be. We just finished to do. Now we are going to do to be. Backshift of the verb to be and change the inversion to normal syntax. So this is an easy one. Are you coming to school tomorrow? Asked Sudha to Ramona. Sudha asked Ramona if whether. So that we are clear now. She was going to school the following day. She was going to school. Statement. Not was she going to school. People do this wrong. Whether she was going to school. Statement. No inversion. Rule to have. Let's see what happens to have. Backshift of the verb to have. Change the inversion back to normal. Same thing. Have you found your pen? Salim asked Rashid. Salim asked Rashid if he had found his pen. Statement. Not had he found. He had found. Have you found is the question. He had found is the backshifted had. Have becomes had. Backshift. It's interesting. It's tricky. Just needs a bit of practice and it will become natural. Modal questions with yes, no. Now it's not just primary verbs. You will also can ask modal questions and you can get a yes, no answer. The questions are made of modals like can, could, shall, should, may, might, etc. Or their negatives. These both can do questions. Remember, questions can be done in positive and can be done in negative, right? So rule is main clause, always the main clause followed by if or whether. This now, by now you should know this because I've said it 20 times. Followed by the subject verbs without inversion. Statement. When I say without inversion means you don't say are you, you just say you are, like a statement. Verb backshifted appropriately. Verb backshifting will always take place. Do not forget that. Plus all the others, adverbs, possessives, whatever other things have to be changed, you have to change. Okay. So if I say, can you sing? Yes, no. You can either say yes or you can say no, right? If I say, can't you help? You can either say yes or you can say no. So they are all yes, no questions. So if I ask you this, what is the indirect? He asked if I could sing. See, can has become could, but it's a statement. I could sing. Second is can't you help would be he asked if I could help or not. Nobody asks you, nobody says he asked if I couldn't help. Kind of a little strange. If I could help or not is what I would do. Not if I couldn't help. That is like its meaning changes actually. Shall we go now? Shall we not bother her? Will change to if we should go and if we shouldn't bother her. So just take that, write the whole sentence down. I've just written the fragment, but you change the whole sentence and look at it again or try to do it and see whether you're right because I've given it to you in brackets. No change in back shift. Now, when do you have no change in back shift? Then you have your past perfect. Had you not rather go home? If I ask you that, then hadn't you better go home? It will still remain the same. It will not shift back because there is nothing to shift back. Could you? Could also, I told you, cannot be back shifted. Should cannot be back shifted. Ought cannot be back shifted. So all of them, those questions will remain the same. They will only probably be inverted, but they will not change to a back shift. Because we've already said this. It's not new. Imperatives. Now we command things, don't we? In commands, the use the subject plus to plus verb, which is the infinitive. To plus verb is the infinitive. Example, stop. The policeman shouted. The policeman asked the man to stop. What have we done? The policeman asked. You don't say the policeman shouted at the man and all that. That is all for direct voice. For indirect, you just say the policeman asked the man to stop. That to stop is what comes through when you say stop. It becomes to stop. It becomes curt to stop. So the policeman asked the man to stop. Subject plus to stop. This is what it is for imperatives. I've given you more examples. Mr. Mohan told his son, don't move till I tell you. Drop the do, don't. Do we drop all the time because it's in the present tense, I told you. And add to before the main verb in the base form. Make all other changes. So the indirect will become Mr. Mohan told his son not to move. Not don't move, but not to move till he told him to. The general barked to the soldiers, come back. The general barked to the soldiers to go back. To go. See, infinitive. The teacher screamed at the class, keep quiet. The teacher screamed at the class to keep quiet. And that's what you do for infinitive. Just remember, to keep quiet, to shut up, to sit down, whatever it is, just put a to and you will be fine. Indirect with let's and tag questions. What happens when you have let's? Rule the intention of let's. Now, when you say let's, what are you saying? What are you saying? When you say let's go, you are basically making a suggestion, aren't you? You're basically making a suggestion. Let's go to a movie. Let's not do that. You're basically making a suggestion to your friend or to whoever. So it is transferred to the reporting verb. Plus should plus base verb. So Mohsin said to Rohan, let's go to the mall and buy some clothes. Let's go. So Mohsin suggested to Rohan that they should go. That let's becomes suggested and then should go. Should go to the mall and buy some clothes. So let's, when you get let's, you may make the reporting verb suggested and use this should go, should come, should take, should do this, should do that, etc. Drop let's and use suggested, like I told you, and then put should plus base verb. Should go, should come, should dance, should sing, whatever. The rule for tag questions. Now, sometimes you have a tag question where you say, you know you cannot talk in the library, don't you? We ask this, don't you? You're coming, aren't you? We should visit her, shouldn't we? This tag question that you do, what do you do with that question? So people get again confused and they say, oh, what to do with that tag question? How do we do it? So very easy, drop it. And what do you do with that tag? You just simply use the verb asked. So when you use a tag question, do not change the question to indirect. You suppose the example is, we cannot talk in the library, don't you? Said the librarian to the boys. The librarian asked whether the boys knew that they could not talk in the library. That's it. She just asked, couldn't you don't talk in the library, right? This is what she's asking. She just asked whether they didn't know that, and that's it. Stop there. The tag question is not necessary, right? Change the reporting verb to asked to accommodate the intention in the tag. So when you say don't you, what are you doing? You're intending something. You're asking what you don't know. This is what you're asking. So that intention is there. Continue with if or whether. As in all yes, no questions, make a statement after that and you're done. The tag you just ignore. Pretend it's a yes, no question. So we come to the last part of indirect speech with conditionals. As you know, there are 4 conditionals, 0, 1, 2, and 3. 0 conditional is for universal truths. Like the sun rises in the west, Delhi is the capital of India. You'll find that all of those are in the present tense. We don't use the past tense because the meaning will change. So here, if you say, if water boils, it is ready for the eggs. You'll find that in both the if clause as well as the main clause, you have the present tense that we use. So present and present is 0 conditional, used for universal truths, historic facts. So that sort of, or scientific facts, which never changes at any time and is general for all people. So there is no change in that sentence when you transform it to indirect speech. So the indirect speech, if you said Latika to Rani, if water boils, it is ready for the eggs. The indirect speech would be Latika told Rani that if water boils, it is ready for eggs. No change at all. You simply use the same tense and you just put a that, and that's it. Very, very easy. The second conditional is your first conditional. So your first, after 0 conditional, first conditional is where the real change happens. Now here what happens is you have a sentence like, if you want to, we will go for the movie. So you've got a present tense in the if clause and you've got a future tense in the main clause. If you want, we will go for a movie. If it rains, we will get wet. All these kind of sentences where you have a present tense and then a future tense, those will go through a back shift. And what is a back shift? Your present tense will become past. So it just goes one step back. So the present becomes past, and that will becomes would. Would is not the past tense of will, but will changes to would. This is all that you need to remember for the first conditional. So let's look at the sentence. If you want to, we will go for a movie, said Latika to Rani. And the indirect is Latika told Rani that if she wanted to, they would go for a movie. So that's the sentence. So if it rained, we would get wet. This kind of thing. It is real. It is the possibility of that happening in the future is absolutely certain. That's your first conditional. Your second conditional is imaginary. And so there is no change. Then it's imaginary, there's no question of any changes. So if I were a better cook, I would have made dinner for you, said Manish to Raghav. So if I were a better cook, it seems to be the past tense. I would have made, this would have plus the tense of the verb, that does not change at all. So the indirect becomes, Manish told Raghav that if he were a better cook, he would have made dinner for him. Same sentence. So you noticed in the zero conditional and now in the second conditional, no change. Let's look at the third conditional. Third conditional is very unreal. If that was unreal, so when you say, if I were a better cook, you are not a better cook. So it is unreal. So then whatever you say after that is just imaginary. That's your second condition. In your third conditional, it becomes even worse. So let's look at the third conditional, where you use the past perfect tense in your if clause. If we had gone earlier, so did we go earlier? No. So if we had gone earlier, which is like not ever going to happen because you're talking about something in the past, you're using the past perfect tense. If we had gone earlier, we would have met. This is completely imaginary. That past will never come back. So you are never, ever, ever going to go earlier and you will never, ever, ever meet that person. So it is totally imaginary. Therefore, that tense also never changes. So what is the tense that actually changes? Only that first conditional. Present and future becomes past and would plus verb. See, that's all you have to remember in conditional. Don't try to remember anything else. Nothing changes in conditional except that present plus will become past plus would and the verb. Simple, so easy. So keep it exactly like that. If we had gone earlier, we would have met them, said Simon to Peter. Peter told Simon that if they had gone earlier, that we and they and all those changes apply throughout. That if they had gone earlier, they would have met them. That tense remains exactly the same. So verb tenses do not change in the unreal and imaginary conditionals. Only in real conditionals do they change. In the universal also, they do not change. I gave you a list of all the exceptions where back shifts don't happen. So that is something that you should be careful about when you do your exercises. So the only conditional that back shifts is the first condition. A real situation with a real possible consequence. That's what your first conditional is. So if you remember this, I think you are completely good with conditionals. So we've done almost all of it. There are exercises that you need to look at now and practice. And of course, you can always ask me questions and I will give you answers in the description box, which you can then look at and see whether you got them right. Now I've given you some exercises for practice. I'm going to put the answers in the description box. Make sure you try it. Watch this video many times so that you don't have a problem. Do a lot of exercises and you will not have any confusion. Otherwise, the exceptions, you will get confused. Back shifting also, you'll get confused. So I want you to work on this very carefully and practice it a lot and you will be absolutely fine. So your direct to indirect voice, you should get full marks in your exams. Remember, they will trick you with the exceptions. So pay attention to the exceptions slide. So I'm sure this has been a long but useful video. So until we meet again, keep smiling, keep practicing. Bye-bye.